My boss handed my promotion to the man who stole my work and then, in front of 300 people at the company awards dinner, told me to stand up and train him like I was his assistant. Everyone clapped for him. No one looked at me. And the worst part wasn't even losing the promotion. It was watching my own sister smile from the front table, because she was dating him and had known the truth the entire time. If this story speaks to your heart, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with you. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and what time it is in your city right now. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old. And 3 weeks ago, at a polished ballroom in downtown Chicago, my family and my career collapsed in the same exact moment. But this didn't start at that dinner. It started 6 months earlier, in a quiet office on the 18th floor, when I still believed hard work meant something. I worked at Collins & Burke Consulting, a mid-sized firm that liked to call itself elite, but mostly ran on overworked analysts and quiet favoritism. I had been there for 4 years. No complaints. No drama. I showed up early, left late, and did the kind of work that didn't get noticed until something went wrong. That's how I became invisible. Not because I wasn't good, but because I was consistent, reliable, replaceable. My boss, Richard Collins, liked people who talked more than they delivered. People like Daniel Brooks. He joined the firm about a year ago. Confident. Polished. The kind of man who never carried a laptop but always seemed to be in meetings. First, I didn't think much of him, until the Phoenix project landed on my desk. It was the biggest client our firm had taken on that year. A $2.4 million strategy overhaul for a retail chain trying to recover from bankruptcy. High stakes. High visibility. And if it went well, it came with something everyone wanted but no one talked about directly. Promotion. Richard called me into his office the day it was assigned. He didn't smile. He never did. "Emily," he said, flipping through a folder without looking at me. "I need this done right. No mistakes." I nodded. "Of course. You'll handle the analysis. Daniel will oversee client communication." I remember pausing for half a second, just enough to feel something was off, but not enough to question it. "Got it," I said. That was the moment I should have paid attention, because from that point on the pattern started. I built everything. Every model. Every projection. Every late night where the office lights shut off automatically at 11 p.m., and I had to wave my arms just to keep working. Daniel showed up to meetings. He spoke in clean sentences. He used my numbers, my insights, my slides. And slowly, people started associating the project with him. Not me. First, I told myself it didn't matter. The work would speak for itself. That's what I had always believed. But then small things started happening. Emails I sent to Richard would go unanswered. Then I'd hear Daniel repeat the exact same idea in a meeting. And suddenly Richard was nodding. "That's strong thinking," he'd say. I remember one specific night. It was 9:47 p.m. I was the only one left on the floor. I had just finished a 62-page strategy deck. My hands were shaking from too much coffee and not enough food. I sent the file to both of them. Subject line: Final Draft Phoenix Project. 10 minutes later I got a reply. Not from Richard. From Daniel. "Looks good. I'll clean it up before presenting." I stared at that email longer than I should have. Something about the wording didn't sit right. But I was tired. So I closed my laptop and went home. The next morning, the deck was presented to the client. I wasn't in the room. Daniel was. Richard was. I watched through the glass wall as they spoke, as they nodded, as the client leaned forward clearly impressed. And when the meeting ended, I saw something that stayed with me longer than I expected. Richard shook Daniel's hand. Not mine. That was the first time I felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Just a quiet shift. Like something had moved slightly out of place and I couldn't fix it. But I told myself it was temporary. That recognition would come later. That hard work had a way of catching up. I didn't know it then. But everything I had built over those 6 months, every late night, every sacrifice weekend, every piece of myself I poured into that project was already slipping out of my hands, and the people closest to me were helping it happen. The next morning nothing looked different, and that was what made it worse. The same gray carpet, the same glass walls, The same hum of printers and quiet conversations that never quite included me. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the way people looked at Daniel when he walked in. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Someone actually said, "Great job yesterday," as he passed by. I was sitting 10 feet away when they said it. He smiled like he had been expecting it. Like it belonged to him. I told myself to focus. Work did not care about feelings. Work only cared about results. So I opened my laptop, pulled up the next phase of the Phoenix project and kept going. But that was not the hardest part. The hardest part came at lunch. I usually ate at my desk. It was easier that way. No small talk. No pretending. But that day my phone buzzed. It was my sister, Rachel. "Lunch," she texted. "Downstairs cafe." I hesitated for a second. Rachel worked in the same building 2 floors below me in a marketing firm. We did not see each other often during the day, but when we did, it felt normal. Familiar. Safe. So I said yes. The cafe was busy. Lines out the door. The smell of coffee and toasted bread filling the space. I spotted her at a corner table, already sitting down scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I approached and smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. I noticed that immediately. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I sat down across from her. "How is work?" she asked. The question sounded casual. Too casual. I shrugged. "Busy. Same as always." She nodded like she expected that answer. Then she glanced past me for a split second. I followed her gaze. And that was when I saw him. Daniel. Standing in line. Looking directly at our table. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he walked over. "Mind if I join?" he said, already pulling out a chair. I felt something tighten in my chest. Rachel smiled. Not surprised. Not confused. Comfortable. "Of course," she said. "Of course." That was the moment everything started to make sense in a way I did not want it to. Daniel sat down next to her, not across. Close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Emily," he said, nodding at me. "Great work on the data pulls last night." The way he said it made it sound like I was assisting him. Supporting him. I forced a small smile. "Thanks." Rachel looked between us, then back at him. "You did not tell me you two were working together so closely," she said. He laughed softly. "We are a team," he replied. A team. I had never heard him use that word before. Not once. I looked at Rachel. "You know Daniel?" I asked. My voice sounded calm. Too calm. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she said, "We have been seeing each other for a few months." Few months. I repeated that in my head like it would change something. It did not. I thought about the timeline. About the late nights. The emails. The meetings I was not invited to. And suddenly the pattern was not random anymore. It was connected. "You could have told me," I said quietly. Rachel gave a small shrug. It did not seem important. Not important. I nodded slowly. "Right." Daniel leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "We wanted to keep things low-key," he added. "Office dynamics and all that." Office dynamics. I almost laughed. But I did not. Because something inside me had gone very still. Rachel reached for her coffee. "Anyway," she said, changing the subject too quickly, "I heard the project went really well." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Trying to find something familiar. Something honest. But all I saw was distance. "Yeah," I said. "It did." "That is great," she replied. "Daniel has been working really hard." There it was. Not we. Not you. Him. I felt it land heavy and quiet. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that she believed it. Or at least she was choosing to. I pushed my chair back slightly. "I should get back," I said. Rachel frowned. "Already?" "Yeah. Deadlines." I stood up before either of them could say anything else. Daniel gave a small nod. "See you upstairs." I did not respond. I just walked away. The elevator ride back up felt longer than usual. 12 floors. 30 seconds. Enough time for everything to settle into place. When the doors opened, I stepped out and went straight to my desk. I sat down. Opened my laptop. And for the first time since this project started, I did not dive into work immediately. Instead, I opened my email. I scrolled. Slowly. Carefully. Every message. Every file. Every timestamp. I started noticing things I had ignored before. Emails where I had sent complete drafts, followed by threads where Daniel presented his version hours later. Messages where I was left off entirely. Files renamed. Forwarded. Claimed. My hands did not shake this time. They were steady. Focused. Because now it was not just about work. It was about something else. Something deeper. And I realized something in that moment that I should have realized weeks ago. This was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a system. And I was the only one who had not seen it clearly. But that was about to change. I did not know exactly how yet. Not fully. But for the first time, I stopped trying to prove my value and started paying attention to the truth. The rest of that week I stopped speaking unless I absolutely had to. Not because I was afraid, but because I was listening, watching. Every meeting, every email, every small shift in tone that I used to ignore. And once I started paying attention, the pattern became impossible to miss. Daniel was everywhere. Not physically, but in conversations that used to include me. My name stopped coming up. His started appearing in places it never had before. Daniel's insights. Daniel's strategy. Daniel's leadership. Words I had earned were being reassigned in real time. And the strangest part was how normal everyone acted. Like this was always the plan. Like I had imagined my role in it. On Thursday afternoon, I was called into Richard's office again. No warning. No context. Just a message from his assistant. He wants to see you. I walked in, closed the door behind me, and stood there waiting. He did not look up immediately. He was typing something, his fingers moving slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. Then he stopped, leaned back slightly, and finally looked at me. "Emily," he said, "we need to talk about next steps." Next steps. I nodded. Okay. He folded his hands on the desk. The Phoenix project has exceeded expectations. I did not respond. I already knew where this was going. Or at least I thought I did. The client is very pleased, he continued. They specifically mentioned Daniel. Of course they did. I kept my expression neutral. That is good, I said. He watched me for a second, like he was waiting for something. A reaction. A correction. But I gave him nothing. So he continued. We are restructuring leadership on the account moving forward. I felt it then. That slight shift again. The same one from before. Daniel will be stepping into a senior role, he said. He will be leading the next phase. There it was. Clear. Final. I nodded once. Understood. Richard raised an eyebrow. You seem calm. I met his gaze. I am. He studied me for another moment. Then he leaned forward slightly. You will support him. Support him. The words landed exactly how they were meant to. Small. Controlled. Dismissive. But I just nodded again. Of course. Because reacting would not change anything. Not yet. He seemed satisfied with that. Good, he said. We have an internal awards dinner next week. It is important you present a unified front. I almost smiled at that. Unified. Of course, I repeated. You will also help Daniel prepare, he added. Walk him through the details. Make sure he understands everything. Make sure he understands everything. I held his gaze, just for a second longer than necessary. Then I said, I will. Because in that moment I realized something else. They thought I still needed this. The job. The approval. The place at the table. They thought I would accept whatever version of reality they gave me, as long as I stayed. And maybe a week ago they would have been right. But not anymore. When I left his office, I did not go back to my desk right away. I walked to the far end of the floor, where the windows overlooked the river. The city stretched out below, gray and steady like nothing had changed. But everything had. I stood there for a few minutes, not thinking, just letting it settle. Then I went back, sat down, opened my laptop, and this time I did not just scroll through emails. I started organizing them, every file, every version, every timestamp. I created folders, labeled them, by date, by phase, by content. I pulled up original drafts and compared them to final presentations, line by line, slide by slide. And the more I looked, the clearer it became. This was not subtle. It was systematic. My work had not just been used. It had been repackaged, renamed, reassigned. I found entire sections copied word for word, graphs recreated with different color schemes, my notes rewritten into his language. But the structure, the thinking, the core, it was all mine. And for the first time since all of this started, I did not feel confused. I felt focused. Because evidence does not argue. It does not explain. Just exists. Around 7:30 p.m., most of the office had cleared out. The lights dimmed automatically, casting everything in that soft, artificial glow that made it hard to tell how late it really was. My phone buzzed again. Rachel, dinner tonight? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. Busy. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. Okay. Another time. Another time. I set the phone down without replying. Because I did not know what I would say to her anymore. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I turned back to my screen. Opened a new folder. Named it simply Archive. And then I started saving everything. Not just emails. But attachments. Metadata. File histories. Even the small things. The kind of details people overlook because they seem insignificant. Because those were the pieces that told the real story. Not the polished version presented in meetings. Not the narrative repeated in conference rooms. The truth. By the time I finally closed my laptop, it was almost 11 p.m. The office was empty. Silent. I packed my bag slowly, deliberately. Then I paused. Just for a second. Looking at the screen before it went dark. Because something inside me had changed in a way I could not undo. I was not trying to fix this anymore. I was not trying to be seen, or recognized, or even treated fairly. I was preparing, and I did not say it out loud. I did not write it down. But the thought was there. Clear, steady, and impossible to ignore. They were going to ask me to stand in front of that room next week. To smile. To support him. To make everything look seamless. And I would. Exactly like they expected. Just not in the way they imagined. The next few days moved slowly, but everything inside me was accelerating. I stopped reacting completely. No questions. No hesitation. Just quiet compliance. Daniel noticed it first. On Monday morning, he walked over to my desk with that same confident posture, holding a printed outline of the next phase presentation. Hey, he said, placing it down in front of me. I am putting together the narrative for the awards dinner. Thought you could walk me through the deeper technical parts. Thought you could walk me through it. I glanced at the paper. It was familiar. Not because I had seen it before, but because I had written most of it. The phrasing was slightly different. The structure was identical. I looked up at him. Sure, I said. His shoulders relaxed slightly, like he had expected resistance and was relieved not to find it. Great, he replied. We should make this smooth. Leadership will be there. Board members too. I nodded. I understand. And I did. More than he realized. That afternoon we sat in one of the glass conference rooms. He connected his laptop to the screen. Slide by slide he walked through what he planned to present. I listened. Occasionally I corrected small things. Clarified numbers. Adjusted wording. He took notes. Nodded. Thanked me. It looked like collaboration. Sounded like mentorship. But it was something else entirely. Because while he was learning how to present it, I was learning exactly how he would claim it. This part, he said at one point, pointing to a revenue projection model. How did you calculate the recovery curve? I leaned forward slightly. It is based on 3 variables, I explained calmly. Store retention rate, regional demand elasticity, and cost restructuring timelines. He typed quickly. Got it. I paused for a second, then added. The original model is in the archive folder. Dated March 12th. He nodded again, not realizing what I had just done. Because that date mattered. Every date mattered. Later that evening, as the office emptied out again, I stayed. Not because I had more work to do, but because I had more to prepare. I opened my laptop and reviewed everything one more time. Emails, attachments, version histories. I cross-referenced timestamps with presentation drafts. Built a clean, simple timeline. Not complicated. Not overwhelming. Just clear enough that anyone looking at it would understand immediately who created what and when. I saved it all into one place. Organized. Accessible. Ready. But that was not the hardest part. The hardest part came Tuesday night. Rachel showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard the knock at 8:12 p.m. I was not expecting anyone. When I opened the door, she was standing there, holding her phone like she had rehearsed what she wanted to say. "Can I come in?" she asked. I hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around like something had changed. Maybe it had. "You have been distant," she said. I closed the door behind her. "I have been busy." She turned to face me. "Emily." The way she said my name made it sound like a warning. Or maybe a plea. I was not sure anymore. "You know what I mean," she added. I did not respond right away. I just watched her, trying to understand how someone could stand in front of me and act like nothing had happened. "You knew," I said finally. Her expression shifted slightly. Not surprised. Not offended. Just careful. "About what?" she asked. I held her gaze. "About the project." She exhaled slowly, looked down for a moment, then back up. "I knew Daniel was leading it," she said. "Leading it." The word landed exactly the same way as before. "That is not what I asked," I replied. She pressed her lips together. "Emily, it is complicated." I almost laughed. But I did not. "It is not," I said quietly. "It is actually very simple." Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Uncomfortable. She stepped closer. "I did not think it would affect you like this," she said. I stared at her. "Like what?" I asked. She hesitated. "Like personally." Personally. I repeated that word in my head, because that was the problem. To her this was not personal. It was just circumstance. Timing. Opportunity. "You watched it happen," I said. My voice was still calm. Too calm. "And you said nothing." She shook her head slightly. "It is not that simple." "Then explain it to me," I said. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. That was my answer. I nodded once. "Okay." I walked past her into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, took a sip, let the silence settle again. She followed me slower this time. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I set the glass down, turned to face her, and for the first time in days I felt something close to clarity. Not anger, not even hurt, just direction. "Nothing," I said. She frowned. "Nothing." I nodded. "I am going to do exactly what they expect me to do." She studied my face, trying to find something beneath the surface. But there was nothing there anymore. Nothing she could read. "Emily," she started. I shook my head gently. "You should go," I said. She stood there for a second longer, then slowly nodded, picked up her bag, walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. "I did not mean to hurt you," she said softly. I held her gaze. "I know," I replied. And that was the truth. That was what made it worse. After she left, I stood there for a while. The apartment was quiet again. Still. I looked at my laptop on the table, at the files I had organized, the timeline I had built. Everything ready. Everything in place. And I realized something then that settled deeper than anything else. This was not about proving them wrong anymore. It was about showing them the truth in a way they could not ignore. Not in private. Not in a meeting. But in the one place they thought they were untouchable. The awards dinner. In front of everyone. And for the first time since all of this started, I smiled. The day of the awards dinner arrived quietly, almost too quietly, like nothing important was supposed to happen. The office was calmer than usual that morning. People were dressed sharper, voices slightly more controlled, like everyone was aware that tonight mattered. I showed up at 8:15 a.m., the same as always, wearing the same neutral expression I had practiced all week. Daniel was already there. Of course he was. He stood near the main conference table, going over his notes, adjusting small details on his laptop like everything depended on precision. When he saw me, he smiled. Not arrogantly, not nervously, just confidently, like someone who believed he had already won. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied. He walked over, holding a printed version of his speech. "I went through everything again last night," he said. "I think it is solid, but I want to make sure I am not missing anything." I nodded. "Let us go through it." We sat down side by side. He read sections out loud, paused, looked at me for confirmation. I gave it to him. Calm, measured, precise. "This part," I said at one point, "you might want to emphasize the restructuring timeline." That is what impressed the client the most. He made a note immediately. "Good catch. Good catch." I almost smiled at the phrasing, because it was not a catch. It was mine. Every detail he rehearsed, every sentence he refined, every emphasis he practiced. I had built it, and he was preparing to present it as his own in front of the entire company. Around noon, Richard joined us briefly. He stood at the head of the table, watching Daniel present a short version of the speech. When he finished, Richard nodded once. "Strong," he said. Then he looked at me. "You have done a good job supporting this." Supporting this. The words were familiar now. Expected. I nodded. "Thank you." He held my gaze for a second, like he was trying to read something beneath the surface. But there was nothing there for him to find, because I had learned how to give them exactly what they wanted to see. Nothing more. Nothing less. By the time the workday ended, the office energy shifted. People left early to get ready. The awards dinner was being held at a hotel ballroom downtown. Black tie optional, but most people treated it like a formal event. I went home around 4:30 p.m. Took my time getting ready. Nothing extravagant. A simple black dress. Clean lines. No statement pieces. No need to stand out. Not yet. As I got ready, I moved slowly. Not because I was nervous, but because I was steady. Every step felt intentional. Controlled. Like I was walking toward something I had already decided. I checked my bag before leaving. Laptop. Charged. Files organized. Backup copies saved. Everything in place. Then I left. The ballroom was already filling up when I arrived. Soft lighting. Round tables. White linens. The kind of environment designed to make everything feel polished and important. I spotted my team near the center. Daniel was there. So was Richard. And Rachel. She was sitting at the same table as them, dressed elegantly, smiling as she spoke to someone I did not recognize. When she saw me, her smile faltered slightly. Just for a second. Then it returned. Controlled. Polite. I walked over. "You made it," Daniel said. "Of course," I replied. Richard nodded at me. "Good to see you here." Rachel did not say anything at first. Then softly, "Hi." "Hi," I said. We all sat down. The conversation flowed around me. Business updates. Light jokes. Small talk designed to fill space before the event started. I listened. Occasionally nodded. Said just enough to seem present. But inside I was somewhere else. Watching. Waiting. The program began around 7 p.m. Speeches. Recognitions. Applause. Everything exactly as expected. Until it was not. About an hour in, the host stepped up again. "And now," he said, smiling broadly, "we want to recognize one of the most impactful projects of the year." I felt it then. That shift. The same one from before. But this time it did not unsettle me. It grounded me. "The Phoenix Project has not only exceeded expectations," the host continued, "but has redefined what strategic recovery looks like for our clients." Applause started building. I kept my hand still in my lap. "Please join me in congratulating Daniel Brooks." The room erupted. Applause. Cheers. People turning toward our table. Daniel stood up, adjusting his jacket slightly, smiling as he walked toward the stage. I watched him go. Calm. Focused. Present. Because this was the moment they had all been building toward. And they had no idea what was about to happen next. Daniel reached the stage with the kind of confidence that only comes from believing the story being told about you. The applause had not fully settled when he took the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and gave that practiced smile I had seen all week. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady, controlled, exactly how he rehearsed it. "This project has been an incredible journey." I sat there, hands still folded in my lap, watching him speak the words I had written. Not similar words. Not inspired ideas. The exact structure. The same sequence. Even the pauses were familiar, because I had planned them. Around me, people leaned in, listening, nodding. Some even glanced at Richard with approving expressions. Like this success reflected leadership at the top. Rachel was watching him too. Her posture relaxed, her expression proud. That part stayed with me longer than anything else. Not the speech. Not the applause. Just that quiet, unquestioned belief. "When we first approached the challenge," Daniel continued, "we knew that traditional recovery models would not be enough." I could have closed my eyes and finished the sentence for him. I did not need to. He did it himself. Exactly as expected. And that was when I realized something important. He did not even know he was repeating me. Not fully. He had absorbed it. Internalized it. Made it feel like his own. Which made what was about to happen even more necessary. The speech went on for another few minutes. Clean. Polished. Effective. At one point he gestured toward our table. "Of course, this would not have been possible without the support of an incredible team," he said. Support. The word again. I noticed Richard nod slightly. Subtle. Approving. The room followed. Applause again. Lighter this time. Controlled. And then Daniel stepped back slightly, signaling the end of his speech. The host returned, smiling, energized. "Thank you, Daniel," he said. "Truly impressive work." Another round of applause. I let it pass. "Before we move on," the host added, glancing at his notes, "we thought it would be valuable for everyone here to get a brief look into the execution side of this project." I felt it then. That final shift. The one everything had been building toward. "Emily Carter," he continued, "would you mind joining us for a moment?" The room turned. Heads pivoting in unison. Attention shifting. Exactly as planned. I stood up slowly. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just deliberate. I could feel Rachel's eyes on me. Daniel stepped slightly to the side of the stage, giving me space, but still close enough to maintain control of the moment. I walked up, each step measured. The stage lights were brighter than I expected, but not overwhelming. Just enough to make everything feel exposed. Real. The host handed me a microphone. "We would love for you to share a bit about how the project came together," he said. I smiled. Small. Controlled. "Of course," I replied. My voice sounded exactly how I wanted it to. Calm. Clear. Nothing beneath it. I turned slightly toward Daniel. "You did a great job outlining the strategy," I said. He nodded, appreciative, relaxed. That was important. Then I looked back at the audience. Rows of faces. Executives. Board members. Colleagues. All watching. Waiting. "I think what is most interesting," I continued, "is how this project actually evolved behind the scenes. No one moved. No one spoke. Because the final presentation you saw tonight," I added, "was not where this started." I paused. Just long enough. Then I reached down and opened my laptop. The screen lit up instantly. Familiar. Prepared. Connected. The projection behind us flickered for a second as the input switched. Then my desktop appeared. Clean. Minimal. One folder visible in the center. Labeled simply Archive. Clicked it. The room remained quiet. But the energy had shifted. Subtly. Almost imperceptibly. "Every project has a timeline," I said, navigating through the files. Decisions. Iterations. Changes. I opened the first file. A document dated 6 months earlier. My name clearly visible in the author field. I did not point to it. I did not need to. This was the initial model, I explained. Built during the first phase. I clicked to the next file. Another date. Another version. Same structure. Same content. Then another. And another. Each one moving forward in time. Each one showing progression. Development. Ownership. I did not rush. I let each file sit on the screen just long enough for people to register it, to see it, to understand. Behind me I could feel Daniel shift slightly. Not dramatic. Just enough. Richard's posture changed too. Straighter. More alert. But no one interrupted. Not yet. And then, I said, opening the final file, we arrive at the version presented tonight. The screen displayed the polished deck. The one Daniel had just presented. Identical in structure. Identical in flow. Only the name in the corner had changed. I turned slightly, looking at the audience again. Not at Daniel. Not at Richard. Just the audience. What matters, I said calmly, is not just the final result. I paused. Let the silence settle. It is the process that builds it. And in that moment the room understood. For a second no one moved. Not the host. Not Daniel. Not even Richard. The room just sat there, suspended in that quiet space where people are still deciding what they are looking at. I did not rush it. I let the screen speak. File names. Dates. Author fields. Patterns that were too consistent to ignore. If you look closely, I said, my voice steady, you will notice that each version builds directly on the previous one. I clicked into the metadata panel on the side. It expanded across the screen. Names. Timestamps. Edit histories. All aligned. All clear. These are not separate ideas, I continued. They are iterations of the same framework. I did not raise my voice. I did not point fingers. I simply moved through the evidence like it was part of a normal presentation. Because that was the most important part. This was not an accusation. It was a demonstration. Behind me I heard a chair shift. Soft. Controlled. I did not turn around. The recovery curve model, I said, opening another file, was first developed on March 12 at 10:43 p.m. The exact time appeared on the screen. It was then adjusted on March 15, March 21, and April 2. Each file opened in sequence, each showing progression. The version presented tonight follows the same structure. I clicked back to the final deck. The comparison was immediate, obvious, unavoidable. I paused again, just long enough. Then I added, the only difference is the attribution. That was the moment everything shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. I could feel it in the room, in the way people leaned forward slightly, in the way conversation stopped completely, in the way attention sharpened. Daniel stepped closer to me, his voice lower now. Emily, he said quietly, not into the microphone. What are you doing? I turned my head just enough to meet his eyes. Explaining the process, I replied. My tone did not change. Not even slightly. He forced a small smile, turning back toward the audience. I think there might be some confusion, he said, now speaking into the microphone. Confusion. The word hung there for a second. I did not interrupt him. I let him continue. Emily has been a great support on this project, he added. Support. Again. But this time it sounded different. Less certain. Less solid. Because now the screen behind him was saying something else entirely. I clicked into one more file. An email thread. Subject line. Final draft Phoenix project. The chain expanded. Messages layered on top of each other. My original email at the bottom. Attachments included. Time-stamped. Then the forwarded version. Then the edited version. Then the presentation version. A clean line from creation to delivery. This is the communication chain, I said calmly. From initial draft to final presentation. No one spoke. Not Daniel. Not Richard. Not the host. The room was completely still. Because at this point it was no longer about interpretation. It was about visibility. I did not need to explain what they were seeing. They were already processing it. I stepped slightly to the side, giving the screen more space. Letting the information take over. Daniel's posture changed. Subtly. His shoulders tightened. His hands no longer rested comfortably at his sides. Richard leaned forward in his seat. His expression no longer neutral. Focused now. Calculating. I noticed Rachel too. Her face had gone completely still. No smile. No reaction. Just stillness. I turned back to the audience. Every project has contributors. I said. And every contribution matters. My voice remained even, controlled. But clarity matters too. I closed the email thread, returned to the main folder. Everything still visible, organized, undeniable. Because when clarity is missing, I added, it becomes very easy to misunderstand where something came from. I let that sit, not as an accusation, not as a statement, just as a fact. The host shifted slightly beside me, clearly unsure of how to proceed. This was not part of the program, not part of the script, but no one stopped me. Not yet. And that was the most important part. Because once people start seeing something for themselves, it is very hard to unsee it. Daniel tried again. I think we can take this offline, he said, his voice tighter now. I looked at him. Of course, I replied. Then I turned back to the audience. I just wanted to make sure the process was fully understood. And in that moment it was. The silence did not break all at once. It shifted, slowly, like a room adjusting to a new reality it had not prepared for. You could feel it in the small movements. Someone setting down a glass too carefully. A chair sliding half an inch. The kind of sounds that only happen when people are no longer relaxed. I stood there still holding the microphone, but I did not speak again immediately. I did not need to, because the evidence was still on the screen. And now it was doing the work for me. One of the board members in the front row leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on the projection. He was older, maybe mid-60s, the kind of presence that did not need to speak often to be heard. He turned slightly toward Richard. Is this accurate? He asked. Not loudly, but clearly enough that the entire table heard him. Richard did not answer right away. That was the first sign, because he always had an answer. For everything. But this time he paused. Just long enough for the room to notice. We will need to review the details, he said finally. Measured. Controlled. But not confident. Not like before. The board member nodded once, but his eyes did not leave the screen. It looks detailed already, he replied. That was when the room changed. Not emotionally. Structurally. Because once someone with authority acknowledges what everyone else is seeing, it becomes real. Daniel stepped slightly closer to me again, his voice lower now, more urgent. We should stop this, he said under his breath. I looked at him calmly. We are almost done, I replied. Almost done. The words settled differently this time. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, but he stopped himself. Because he knew. There was nothing he could say that would change what was already visible. I turned back to the audience. There is one more thing I would like to show, I said. My tone remained even. Not confrontational. Just complete. I navigated back into the folder and opened a smaller file. Not a presentation. Not a model. Just a simple document. Clean. Organized. A timeline. This summarizes the development process, I explained. The screen displayed a clear sequence. Dates on the left. Milestones on the right. Each tied to a specific file, a specific action, a specific author. It is not complicated, I added. It is just chronological. A few quiet murmurs moved through the room. Not loud, not disruptive, but present. Because now, people were no longer just observing. They were connecting the pieces themselves. I stepped slightly away from the laptop, letting the screen take center focus, letting the information stand on its own. Because that was the difference now. I was no longer presenting. I was stepping back. And that made everything louder. I noticed Rachel again. Her eyes moved between the screen and Daniel, then back to me. Something in her expression had shifted. Not fully, but enough. Enough to recognize that this was no longer something she could ignore. The host finally stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the moment. Thank you, Emily, he said. His voice careful, measured. That was a very thorough. He glanced briefly toward Richard, then back to the audience. We will, of course, follow up on this appropriately. Appropriately. The word hung there, vague but heavy. I nodded once. Of course, I replied. Then I closed my laptop. The screen behind us went dark. Just like that. The evidence disappeared. But the impact did not. Because once something has been seen, It does not need to stay visible to exist. Daniel stepped back slightly, creating distance between us. Not dramatically, just enough to signal something had changed. Richard remained seated, but his posture was different now. Less composed. More aware. The kind of awareness that comes when control slips even slightly. I handed the microphone back to the host. "Thank you," I said. Then I stepped off the stage. No rush. No hesitation. Just the same controlled movement I had maintained all night. As I walked back to the table, the room did not return to normal. Not immediately. Conversations started again, but they were quieter. More contained. Eyes followed me for a moment longer than they had before. Not in admiration. Not in judgment. Just recognition. I reached my seat and sat down. Rachel did not speak. Neither did Daniel. Richard remained silent as well. And for the first time since all of this started, no one told me what I was supposed to be. No one labeled me as support, or background, or invisible. Because now they knew. Not because I said it, but because I showed it. And that was something they could not take back. The ballroom never fully returned to what it had been before. The music came back. The host continued the program. People clapped at the right moments. But something underneath it all had shifted and everyone felt it. By the time the night ended, the conversations were quieter, more careful. Like people were choosing their words instead of letting them flow. I did not stay long after that. I said polite goodbyes, nodded when spoken to, and left before anyone could turn the moment into something else. Outside, the air was cold, the kind of Chicago night that makes you breathe a little slower, a little deeper. For the first time in months, I felt still. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just clear. The next week was not dramatic. There were no shouting matches. No sudden speeches. Just meetings. Quiet ones. Behind closed doors. The board requested a full review. Files were examined. Timelines verified. Conversations were had without me in the room, and that was fine. Because I had already said everything that needed to be said. Daniel stopped coming to my desk. Eventually, he stopped coming in altogether. Richard avoided eye contact at first, then scheduled a short meeting that lasted less than 10 minutes. He thanked me for my professionalism. I nodded, listened, and walked out knowing that word did not mean what he thought it did anymore. A week later, I turned in my resignation. Not out of anger. Not out of defeat. But because I no longer needed to stay in a place where my value had to be proven after it was already taken. I left quietly. No announcement. No explanation. Just a simple email and a clear desk. Rachel called me after that. More than once. I did not answer the first few times. When I finally did, the conversation was different. Slower. More honest. Not perfect. Not healed. But real in a way it had not been before. And that was enough for now. Life after that did not become suddenly perfect. I did not wake up one morning with everything figured out. But it became something better. It became mine. I started consulting independently. Smaller clients at first. Then bigger ones. People who valued clarity. People who asked questions instead of assuming answers. People who listened. And in that space I realized something I wish I had understood years earlier. Your value does not decrease just because someone else refuses to see it. And you do not have to stay in a place that keeps asking you to prove something you have already given. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not fight louder. It is to stand still long enough for the truth to speak for you, and then walk away when it does. If you are listening to this and you have ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or quietly replaced, I want you to know this. You are not invisible. You are not less. You are not behind. You are simply in a place that does not deserve to define you. And that can change. It does not happen all at once. It happens in small decisions. In moments where you choose yourself even when it is uncomfortable. Even when it is quiet. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Truly, if it resonated with you in any way, I would love to hear where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. And if this story meant something to you, even just a little, you can like or subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. You are not alone in this. My name is Emily Carter, 32 years old, and the lesson I want to leave you with is this. Never let someone else's version of you become the truth you live by.